Good evening to everybody. If you are joining us for the first time, this is the Design Thinking Ghana Meetup, monthly meetup meeting. So we have these monthly meetings where our facilitators come and share on topics of interest, but also topics where they can engage us on the design thinking process. And we're very excited to have Brian here with us today. It's interesting because last year, his session was the highest attended and also the highest viewed on YouTube. So we're looking forward to a repeat of that, right? Say when it's nice, you do it twice. So without further ado, Brian, I'm going to leave the introduction to yourself. But make sure that you tell us, you inspire us with your introduction. Otherwise, I'll fill in the blanks. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gordon. So again, as Gordon said, welcome to everyone who's joining us today. This is part of a design thinking series we're doing to be able to educate more people on how you can apply design thinking tools to your daily lives, to your businesses, and generally towards self-improvement, being more human-centered in your approach to things and also in your approach to success. And so today we'll be primarily looking at navigating the customer journey with empathy. When we talk about that, we are going to be primarily focusing on if solving problems is enough, because oftentimes when we are trying to start businesses, we are told to solve problems. But today we're going to actually debunk that idea and talk about what additions can actually get you towards solutions that are meaningful to your consumers. So I am Brian Achampong, and a bit about me. I have a big background in business development, startup ecosystem support. So I've worked with organizations like Impact Hub and Andy West Africa. And with these organizations, primarily focused on helping startups to build a model, be more intuitive with how they build their solutions, and also aiding them to raise resources to execute. And currently, my work is focused on my company and my startup, Green Hopper, which we'll actually be using as a case study today. It's in the automotive space. And so I'm sure there'll be some really exciting insights from that, which would also be honest experiences, which I hope make the whole presentation today a lot more relatable for everyone. In case you have any questions, feel free to put those down and you can share those after the session, or if it's extremely urgent, you can pause and actually share within the session. So Gordon, if that's sufficient enough, I'll just go ahead and get started.
Yeah, I think that's good. It's good. Let's go.
We'll take it. Great. So what I'm really excited today is because we're going to look at wicked problems. The first time I saw the word wicked and problems, it was very daunting because problems are already tough. So to have wicked problems, you must be going through a lot. But why we classify problems as wicked when we go into the world of design thinking is because everything is so modular and so complex today, where you have so many factors affecting customer choices, information of products, and it's now more difficult than ever, also considering macroeconomic factors, to be able to understand what your customer needs and deliver those needs. And oftentimes, even if you do that, you're still not successful. So the first thing we want to do today is understand why problems of today are so difficult to solve. And to do that, we have to look at the framework of a lot of industries. And that's simply the fact that a lot of industries operate in this VUCA environment, which is how we term it. VUCA simply means that the marketplaces we find ourselves in today are volatile. So there's a high rate of change. There's so much innovation that's consistently happening, and there's so much competition. There's also immense levels of complexity because now there are so factors directing decisions from globalization and influence and politics, and it just makes it so much more difficult to operate. And then you have the ambiguity, the lack of knowledge or knowing what the future looks like, which is also compounded by the fact that, again, for so many consumers, due to their changing needs, it's difficult at times for your product to be successful this quarter and also to have the same levels of success in the next quarter. And what that leaves you with is an uncertainty sometimes of how you are going to operate. And so what we try to understand with this VUCA environment is how well can you predict the outcome of your actions and how much do you know about the situation in order to act? Because if you do not do this, then you're going to end up again in this ambiguous space where you're uncertain about what to do. Situations and markets seem complex and you're just volatile and moving along with the change that's happening. So in order to understand this, I wanted to contextualize it to things we are familiar with. So a simple question of what will Africa, or let's say to be more specific, Ghana, look like in the future? Let's say if we gave it 10 years in 2034. And why I ask the question, what will Africa look like in the future, is because currently, and let's just say Ghana, there are so many challenges we have, right? And equally with our businesses, we all want to build things that would become successful. But the bigger question is, even before thinking of 10 years to come, we're thinking of all the complexities that exist today. And so sometimes even envisioning those possibilities are difficult. And what that equates to is that we really have to understand the needs for why we are doing things and equally where we are going. And a phrase by Brown, which I really like, is that we are at a critical point where rapid change is forcing us to look not just at new ways of solving problems, but to new problems to solve. So it's really a different way to thinking about how our problems are going to meet our solutions. And if you want to contextualize that even further, we can look at our businesses. What would our businesses look like in the future? And again, like I said, I am just starting a business and equally have that excitement that a lot of entrepreneurs have, right? But taking the idea of what you're doing now and extrapolating that to look at what you'll be doing in the future becomes a real challenge of understanding if what you're doing now is consistent with its relevance to your consumers. So the realities in this case, and again, these are things we've all experienced, will include factors that I think started a huge chain of events from the pandemic, right? Where, you know, a lot of businesses had to shut down, a lot of industries were never the same. There were a lot of changes in how we operate and even how business is done. And you even take realities such as wars that are currently happening, which have effects even in countries they are not happening in, affecting things like fuel prices and a lot more. And then there's technology advancement, where you have AI, which is competing with jobs, but equally improving and making it easy for consumers to access certain services, where it even begs the question of if our products are relevant or if AIs can provide solutions to our services. Then there are the macroeconomic conditions. As we know, the economy makes some way, right? So there are all these challenges, even in terms of operating and executing your business, from climate change and took an Uber today, and just how hot it is, compounded with the dusty roads. It's a whole lot to go through. And then the demographic shifts as well, shifts in taste, shifts in generations and their interests, and also cultural globalization, where now a lot more market trends are affected even beyond your current environment. And then you have the cultural dynamics, right? Where people are also more political than ever. So how you even consider things like ESG objectives is a lot more meaningful to your company than it was 10 years ago. So the reality is all these VUCA elements affect our industries. And so for us to be successful, they are things we have to acknowledge when we are moving forward. And so is solving the problem enough? That's the big question we are trying to answer today. And from the research I did and really trying to understand how markets are working now, the simple answer was that it is not. And I want us to look at some practical examples in order to understand why. So you can even look at Lego, which is a very popular toy brand that I'm sure we are all extremely familiar with. There's so many different variations of Lego pieces and Lego buildings that are created, and it's one of the most popular toy brands. But when Lego was actually released in 1949 and towards the Denmark market, it didn't get the traction that they expected it would have. It actually wasn't a very successful product at launch. And although it had the same idea of enabling you to interlock different building pieces to build structures, which is still what Lego does today at its core, it wasn't an immediate success. So why did a good idea fail? That's the big question we'll be asking. And why might that same good idea succeed? So with Lego, for example, with its initial variations, it had limited variety. So although it was building blocks, children didn't feel like it was fun enough for them to play with, or they didn't get the idea of what they would want to build with a Lego set. There was also a perception that it was a basic toy. So compared to other action figures and other more fun toys, people couldn't see how just a simple brick could work as a really fun thing to do with your spare time. And then there was the competition, which we usually find ourselves in where we go into red ocean markets. These are usually markets that are already saturated by big players with a lot of resources. And what that means is that we are really fighting for the consumer's attention. So because the product probably wasn't communicated well enough, potentially not targeted the right market, and also wasn't differentiated as a blue ocean where it was clear the value was adding, it didn't have its success when it was released. But you fast forward to today and Lego pieces look like this. You see people building entire communities, estates, and you even see branded Lego pieces of Star Wars ships and a whole lot more, even to the extent where we have Lego movies. And so how do we go from simple building pieces to now having brands, to now being able to build entire cities of Lego sets, and it being currently one of the most successful toy brands? That brings us to the simple question of how the same idea of Lego ended up becoming successful. And that's because when they decided to go back to the board and actually understand the customer better, go beyond the problem of saying, if you're bored, you need to play with toys, they were able to get more insights. They were able to now introduce themes to the Lego pieces and the Lego buildings that they were introducing. So you don't just buy a blank Lego set, but it's telling you what you can build. It's showing you the capacity and the capabilities of what your Lego is capable of. They also focus more on the design and the technology, making sure that the Lego figurines were now shaped differently so that you don't just build pieces vertically, you could build horizontally in a lot of different ways. And now it was easier to be creative because there was a dynamism that wasn't there before. There was also an emphasis on creativity and education. They decided that if we want people to build, we want people to not just have fun, but to learn, we have to make it so that Lego pieces can potentially be educational. And so now it became a thing where it was actually playing with Lego could lead to cognitive development, reasoning better, being more creative, and people could actually see those benefits. They also decided to expand the focus of the brand to now consider media, entertainment, branding, and licensing. So why limit the product to just ourselves when if there are already popular things such as Star Wars, such as Batman, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, why not take advantage of those things that consumers are already interested in and tailor Lego to suit it? And that worked because they just went from solving the problem of people need toys to understanding what were the interests of people, what were the things in popular culture that could make it easy for people to connect with our product. Was our product design actually meeting the plain requirements of our users? And were our users all children, or were we looking to target maybe the child looking to learn? Asking those further questions beyond solving the problem. And we can even look at this. If anyone knows what this is, you can drop it in the comments. I'll give like a second for you to do so. But 1 second, so I'll just share. This is a Segway, right? And Segways, it looks extremely cool. This was supposed to be the future of transportation and of mobility. And unlike Lego, that was very old, this was in the 2000s, so it's a much more recent innovation. When Segways were introduced, they were received and hailed as one of the most revolutionary things ever in the transport market. And there was a lot of excitement for what it could mean to urban transportation. It featured self-balancing technology, which was new for its time, and it promised a futuristic solution to moving around, looking at a replacement of vehicles, reducing pollution, eco-friendly, and just an easy way to travel. So an awesome solution, but again, it didn't succeed when it was released. Solving a clear problem, but wasn't successful. And there were different reasons for this. One, the price was high. So again, when it comes to the user, doing something good isn't enough. Is the price working for the right user? There was also limited practicality. So when it comes to moving the Segway around, and I think it averagely had a battery lasting around 4 hours, there were all the challenges of what about if the battery dies on you? And also due to the design and it being a bit bulky, what if you needed to cross a curb? What if you got to the office where you're not going to carry it across the stairs? There were a lot of difficulties when it came beyond its functionality to how do we even live with this thing? Then there were issue of safety concerns. This is not a car. This is not a bicycle. Where exactly do you drive this? What is safe for it? And where exactly do you even park it? And the idea of social stigma, which is also a really popular motivator for customers today, where people are very interested in how they are viewed as they're using products. It's actually very important for people sometimes to feel like when they are wearing things, they are being considered as cool in society, right? Which is equally something with the new Apple headsets that have been released, and the VR headsets was an equal question of wearing this in public, wearing this on trains, and how people are going to be perceived. All these things play a bigger part than simply solving the problem. So Segway decided to rethink all of this because they realized developing a good solution to the problem just wasn't enough. And they decided to redesign and repurpose it. So now we have new cases for the Segway, the same device, but new markets and new designs. So now they figure that, if it's difficult for someone to buy this, keep this in their house and take it to work every day, how about we make it available for people going on tours in urban cities? So that you just take your Segway, your tour is about 4 hours, which is close to the battery life. It's easier for you to move across your locations with a lot less stress. And when you're done, you don't need to take it home. You can just park it. And that made sense. They also decided that police move around a lot, especially more cops and when they are in the parks in Western countries. So why not add this as a form of mobility that can make them trailing parts a lot more easier in navigating to different locations? And that also made a lot of sense because it had a carriage compartment where they could store important things. And again, it reduced the problems of them having to take it home or face challenges by having to climb curbs and so on. And again, you can see the example of it being used in a mall and even at farms where you have extremely large scale farms and farmers have to move around extremely vast distances. Again, it's easier for you to use the Segway. There are clear paths for you to travel across and you can do your work more efficiently. And also in warehouses. And then they said, if we still want to reach the user, maybe it's not that we had a bad product, but we just simply had to redesign its functionality and its form factor. So they equally made something that was actually possible and portable, making it easier for people to use this version of the Segway, but still be able to pack it up and also making it more portable. Thus providing functionality to that user who wanted to own it personally. So from this same idea that failed, we now look at the reasons for why this idea succeeded. And here it's simply because, again, they tackled things beyond just the problem of making mobility easy. They looked at how they improved maneuverability. They looked at how they could adapt it to different terrains, whether you were going to the farm, whether you were going to the mall, whether you were going to a tourist destination, and what worked best for those type of users. They streamlined the design to make it easier and to make it more suitable for purpose. And they expanded the product line so that whether you needed a bigger Segway for your trip or you were just going to have a portable version, there was a version that worked for you. And so again, in both these cases, these are great ideas and these are businesses that have seen success. And although they were in a large way using the product and trying to solve the same purpose, when they just tackled the problem, that wasn't enough. But after they tested and they got further insights beyond just solving the problem, it made a big difference in how they approached the market and equally how the market received them. And so now I want us to look at failure and success and the differentiating factors that exist as we debunk the idea today that solving problems in our VUCA world is enough. So the first thing that was very important in both these cases was understanding the problem. It's a core we can ignore, but it's equally a core that wasn't sufficient for us to actually execute and see the full benefits of the solution. So as design thinkers and as business people and service providers, our first priority after we understand the problem is, how do we go further? Are there pain points within this problem space that are the actual challenges of our customers, not just the larger problem that we see? And what is the journey of that customer through a problem? Because again, looking at the Segway, for example, you wouldn't move from point A to point B, but what happens between that? What happens when you hit the curb? What happens when you have to store it? And at all these different points of the experience, are we equally targeting the right subgroup to get our product to? Again, like I said, I'm running a young company. Some of you might be, or even running larger companies, but oftentimes you're releasing new products. And usually we forget ourselves and we release this to the larger market. But just like with Lego deciding to streamline, finding a core market that loved the idea and it being a success for them, do we ask ourselves if the market we are targeting is clear enough, or are we just looking at a broader market base? And also, have we understood if the market is currently prepared for our solution? So again, sometimes it's timing. And then finally, the point of the experience of the solution. Doing something good, and that's usually a problem we face as engineers. You think you've done something good, but then when you start to look at the problem and look at the use case as creators, you realize that it's not as intuitive to the customer. And so in our processes now, as we think about the problem, I want us to start thinking further to understanding, was it clear enough for our pain points of the customer beyond just the general scope? Did we look at the journey of that customer through the problem and the different spaces they found themselves in? Is that customer too broad, or is there a subgroup that I can direct the solution to that could be an early adopter of what I'm doing? Is there preparedness for the solution? Is the timing right, or am I too early for the market? And finally, what is the experience of what I'm giving, and is this something that's enjoyable? And this brings us to the question of why design thinking? A simple question, which I'm sure we all know. You can drop the answer in the comments if you know the answer to this. But simply, what is 5 plus 5? And I think, and I hope a lot of us would say 10. I know people like to be creative, and there are some 55s and other answers that come up. But let's just go to the basic mathematics and say 5 plus 5 gives us 10. When we look at another situation of question mark plus question mark, we get the same 10. But the big difference here becomes the possibilities. There are now so many different combinations that we can create that can give us a lot more dexterity in how we reach a solution of 10, from 1 plus 9 to 8 plus 2 to 5 plus 5. And what these question marks represent in this case is we know what the problem is, but how much is our solution tailored to that problem? So although we are trying to get to 10 as an answer, are we going by using 5 plus 5? Are we going by using 7 plus 3? Are we going by using 10 plus 0? And that's how we have to start thinking about our problems. Not that it's a clear-cut answer, but that we really have to even look at the equation that we are looking at to solve that answer. And I hope this analogy is helpful, at least in just understanding that at times it's really not that your answer is wrong, but it's simply that the parameters, the factors, and the design you're using to get there is not what works for your market. And a quote I'd like to add here is by Ellen Chen, and she says that the customer is the expert of their problem, and you are the expert in finding a solution to that problem. So you do have to understand that as much as that customer understands that problem, your job as a design thinker, your job as a creator, as a service person, is to see what is that solution to making sure that problem and its requirements are solved in a way that satisfies their needs. And that leads us to a definition of design thinking, where for those of us who are new and for those of us who know, it just gives us a bit more context. So simply put, I love the definition by Tim Brown because I feel like it's extremely simple. Design thinking is a human-centered approach to innovation that draws from the designer's toolkit to integrate the needs of the people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements for business success. It's a broad spectrum where we are looking at creative, human-centered ways with technology that can help us get to our solution, where we don't see ourselves as the people providing the solution, but see the customer as the one with the requirements for us to give them something that they actually need and that will provide value in their lives. So oftentimes with the design thinking journey, we would start from our research to understand the user, apply empathy to really know what their intrinsic needs are and develop insights, define our problems clearer, and then from there, prototype solutions, ideate how those solutions can look, and validate it again by further testing with the market, just like in the case of Segway and just like in the case of Lego, in order to make sure that we develop better solutions that are tailored to what the market actually needs and is ready to consume. And so I'm just showing this as a general design thinking journey. This is something you can look up further, but for today, we are going to be primarily focusing on customer journey maps and customer empathy maps. I'm going to take a 10-second pause here in case you have any questions. To check if everyone is good, feel free to put a thumbs up in the comments. and then we'll be heading right on to talk further about the customer journey map and the customer empathy map. All right, great. So since we're all on board, we can move on now. So when we look at the customer journey map, for example, one of the quotes I also like is this one by MIT's 24 Steps program, where they say that customers and markets change over time. So what is true one year may be invalid the next, which is a simple idea of sometimes we feel comfortable with our understanding of the problem. But the big question here is if that understanding is always sufficient for the solution we are developing. And again, in this VUCA world, we've looked at if that solution is always consistent. So in order for us to better understand this, like I said, I'm going to use the personal example of my own startup, because this is a very young company where we're equally building it, consistently trying to understand our users and develop a better product. So the product itself is called Fetal to Tech, and all it's simply trying to do at its core is see how we can connect vehicle owners in Africa to verified mechanic and technical services to improve the experience of being able to access these services, support them to afford it, and equally support the other ecosystem needs they have. So in order to understand this, I mean, we knew that generally when you speak of mechanics, there are a lot of challenges. And just looking at Ghana, for example, we got our data, right? So over 3.5 million cars, a large percentage are using used cars, meaning they're having a lot of breakdowns. Then you have a big overdependence on roadside mechanics, but you don't have an equal match for the satisfaction these users are having. And then now you have a big problem of silos, where users have to navigate between part dealers, service providers, insurance companies, auto financiers, and so much more by themselves, oftentimes in order to have a successful service. And it was clear to us that this was the problem, and this was something that was daunting. There were difficulties with finding credible technicians. There were difficulties with locational challenges, because sometimes you have a good technician, but you're not in that area. There was the cost of service, which could be expensive, especially with OEMs and semi-organized garages, poor service time delivery, poor communication, and just a lot of problems that let us know that we were probably on track to solving something good. But when we decided to test this problem at its core, building our own set of internal good skill mechanics we can connect to users, digitizing this experience, enabling membership so that for things like diagnostics throughout the year, you never have to pay to deliver the service. We noticed that it was working and it was improving the user experience, but we had to ask ourselves if it was being as successful as we wanted. So I actually developed a journey map. And again, this is a journey map based on the insights we had worked from to see how our user experience was. And at this juncture, I'm equally going to explain what the different functions and the different parameters of your journey map are. So the journey map is simply a tool that is designed to help you to understand your customer's journey using your product. It's supposed to help you understand what your customer is doing before they access your product, during the process where they are actually engaging with your service, and even after. In the journey map, we have 3 levels, as you can see on my screen. There's the happy level, where the customer is excited about the experiences you're having. There's the indifferent level in between, where the customer is neutral to the experiences you're having. And then there's the sad level. These are the experiences that are negative for your customer. And so over here, as we can see, with the sad level, for most customers, when they start their journey with bringing their car to the garage, what obviously happens is that the car has a breakdown. And so at that point, they detect the problem. The first way we solve this is by making our customers members. So rather than them having to now search for third-party garages, they can simply contact us at Vita, whether it's through our platform, through our website, through WhatsApp Business. So it's easier. And then from there, they can get their car to the garage. We equally try to simplify this by enabling the option for someone to pick up the car. So now we've taken that problem we've spoken of, where sometimes the customers struggle with getting the car to the mechanic because of the location, by making sure that someone can actually help move that customer's vehicle. And there the customer gets a diagnostics, and we actually make this a report, which is also digital so it can be shared. And what that does is that it makes it more easy for them to actually read about their car, understand what the problems are, and understand what the solution will be. From that point, the service is done by the garage. What we try to do is that between the point where the service is done by the garage and the customer is paying for the service, we ask ourselves how we can still add value to the customer's journey during this process. And we've done this by introducing courtesy cars, where when the customer's vehicle is in the workshop, we're able to provide them with a complimentary car in the interim that they can use. So they are no longer that burdened of how they move around. Is the service going to be finished in a good time? We also added an element called feature buddy support, where the customer can get real-time updates from someone who is looking at their vehicle and helping to take care of it at the garage. After the process, we don't stop. When the customer is done with the service, we go ahead to extend the warranty to make sure that they feel if they have any challenges, it's easy for them to come back, and also add post-service relations. So here, as you can see, we thought we had a banger and a great solution to a problem that was extremely rich. But like I said, just like with Lego and just like with the Segways, it wasn't successful. Although it went well and it had a great reception. And this is just an example of a value fulfillment blueprint, which is a more detailed version of a journey map. If you want to look at that further, feel free to reach out. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be in some of the content that will be shared in further series. So although we had a good idea, we asked ourselves, could it be more successful, and why wasn't it successful? And we realized that with providing services from a technical team ourselves, it created an overdemand. In times where we had a lot of customers wanting to do services in a week, there was a lot of strain on the technicians we had available. And so there became a big need to try to reach out to further third-party technicians. And at times, their time schedule might have not always been aligned with ours. There was also a big issue when it came to availability of payment for services that were being done for customers. And the reason for this was, at times a customer gets an invoice, but again, that invoice is beyond their pocket, but they do need to work for their car and complete the service. And that just created a really big gap between a customer wanting to use the product, but not having the financial capacity to be able to do so. And lastly, there was an issue of ecosystem of support services, where we realized that although it was great to have things like courtesy cars, that was just too much of a burden on the model. And because it was a promise, for customers who received it and customers that didn't because of the limited quantity, it affected the brand and what the brand was looking to do. So we needed to go back to the drawing board and look at, we think we're solving a problem and we know we're doing something good, but how do we make sure that we are going beyond the problem to solve the real needs in the real journey of the customer when it comes to fixing their vehicles? And that led us to a revised version of our solution, where we moved it from just digital service delivery to actually being a marketplace. So now we were able to not just look at us as an internal garage, but look at building a network of third-party garages that could be certified, meaning that now it was easy and a lot more convenient to be able to plug in services across varying locations to garages that we trusted to deliver the service quality that we were able to. We also decided to hamper a lot more repair financing instruments because we heavily realized that even from our first service, a big enabler to our customers was that we had flexible options for how they could pay, how they could benefit from the service, and also how we made it easy for them to access services without feeling like they'll have to deplete their budgets. And then finally, we decided to make sure that this entire experience could be managed by tools where customers could look at their data, their service history, and also request for further services to complement what they wanted to do with their vehicle. So now we went from looking at large and the huge variety of problems that we had thought about to looking at these things that were really standing out in the customer's experience and the customer's problem. So this is another journey map that we developed, and it's a very brief one because it's a lot more focused. When the customer detects the problem and they go to the garage, oftentimes, and from our research, over 60% of the time when it's a larger problem, when the customer receives their diagnostics, there's a big issue between the affordability of the service. And the customer has three primary reactions from our hypothesis. They ask for payment options to see if the garage they're going to has that service, and often cases they do not. They want to do something cheaper. So either they're doing half of the service or they're asking for inferior parts just to get the service done, which leads to the consequence of more problems. And then finally, they contemplate deferring the service altogether, meaning they're intentionally driving a car that they know could have issues, and that could even in some cases be detrimental and be unsafe. So we wanted to understand this problem and see how we plug ourselves into this problem of enabling customers to access services in the first place, not just with us, but around garages in the city and beyond. And that led us to this question: how do we enable the affordability of auto services for salaried African vehicle owners across garages? And that inspired a clearer product, a product we call Theta Finance. So now with this product, we are able to design a service that enable customers beyond our capacity and beyond our network to be able to plug into third-party garages and support networks to access services and pay for them a lot more affordably. We can direct financing directly to garages, being able to approve and even certify and extend warranties to what the customers are doing, providing security, providing affordability, and providing ease towards what the customers want to do with their car. And also, most importantly, not making them compromise on the quality of the service they want to execute. Again, a very simple, yes, if there's someone speaking. Okay, I think we're good. So again, a very simple product, a lot more simple than what we were trying to develop before, but better tailored to the journeys we've actually noticed for the customer. And just since launching, we already have demand and users of the service. So now, why did this idea have more success? And again, it's a young product, so we'll see how it goes. But how come it's having a good reception? Well, that's because one, we tested something and we got better insights that let us understand what is the big need or the big starting point for a customer with our service. Is it just that a car breaks down, or is it that we're able to make it easy for them to access services through us by making it simpler for their budgets to afford it? We're also able to enable more support for customers. By building a marketplace, they are no longer limited to the capacity of our internal garage. We still have that as an option, but now we enable customers to access services over a broader spectrum, meaning that it's easier for them to get value across from us and across the partners we work with. We also looked at what market conditions required. And again, as we said earlier, the economy is tougher, there are vocal realities, macroeconomic conditions are hitting a lot of people. So enabling people to be able to do key services on vehicles they use every day and be able to afford financing for those services makes such a big difference in solving a real need they have for their cities, which is extremely important for them to spend in the right places. And we rebranded the product. We didn't just look at it as a service delivery for mechanic services, but we looked at it as something that could make a big change when it comes to spending and when it comes to affordability of living in African countries and African cities when it comes to taking care of your vehicles. And so through, again, the same product, restructuring it, rebranding it, looking at the design and what it responded to, we're able to have more success. And what all of this culminates to is empathy. The simple idea of not just taking your users' needs and knowing what those needs are, but being able to extrapolate insights from it and actually understand that beyond the problem, what is the journey and what are we solving? Going beyond just function of I need a service to understanding why do you need a service and what stops you from having that service? Understanding truly what the customer's goals are. And sometimes it's even beyond us. Like with the case we had with a recent customer where he had other expenses to do around the household. So oftentimes now they can't even afford the service, but this is the flexibility the solution provides. And then you go to aesthetics, being able to speak to the brand. Again, something that Lego did, which added to a lot of success for them, which is simply the fact that you have to design your product in a way that when consumers see it, it appeals to the needs they have, and it appeals to what they are looking for in terms of a solution. Because sometimes we make our solutions too complex, and that's because we are thinking of it from the larger point of what the future would be, but everything needs a starting point. And by having that starting point, you create more clarity, not just for you, but for your user to know where to access that product. And then we go to the point of psychological effects, letting the users know that it's simple and the value of the product is direct. So that's why when we look at this, a simple phrase like service your vehicles now, pay later, you don't need to hear anything more. It speaks to what the user needs. It lets them know the flexibility it would have. And it also even tells them that if they need service the vehicle, there's that support that exists within the ecosystem to deliver the service. So what we want to move to now is the fact that we've all thought we've had markets, and oftentimes we operate for months, the quarter, half the year, full year, without taking time to review, are our markets still responding to the exact needs that they were responding to when we started operating to them? But what I want this session today to be is a chance for us to ask ourselves tough questions of, have we rediscovered our markets recently? And is that market's needs still the needs that we thought they had? And for this, we can look at things like empathy mapping to do so, where we think of their customers' experience in terms of what they are thinking, what they are feeling, what they're seeing, what the experiences are, what they say, what they hear, what they're doing. The simple point of this empathy map is it allows us to take all those insights we looked at before, all those responses of what didn't work well for the customer internally and in their surroundings, plot all of it out, and reposition how our solution responds to them. So with this empathy map, for example, again, if I was looking at it for our product, we can see that what are the customers' pain points? They wanted to fix their vehicles. But what was the bigger challenge? Sometimes it was a huge problem of affordability for those fixes. It was a huge problem of location. Were they able to easily access the service to be able to fix that vehicle? What do they hear? For most garages, there isn't financing options. And so usually either you're going for a cheaper option or you have to defer the service. And what were they doing? Oftentimes they defer the service or they decide to go for something cheaper, which leads to them usually even incurring a lot more cost. So what they say, for example, in these cases that I'm going to find another garage, I'm going to find another service. It would be great if there was a way to afford to pay for this service. And what they often see is that most garages do not have this option. So we take all these problems and we work on translating them to what can benefit our customer. Is it the financing? Is it a third-party network? Is it a marketplace? Is it extending the support we are able to give and making them able to access it through garages and services they are already doing so that we take away that challenge of fully signing onto a product. We bring in the value of having synergy and most importantly for us, affordability. This is a simpler version of the template as well that you can consider. So again, it's the same empathy map, but with this one, it allows you to just simply look at what the categories are so that you can be able to plot out those categories as you do research and take out those points to draw your insights. And again, we're going to work on sharing this deck so that these templates are available to you. And when you do decide to rediscover your market, which I'm hoping everyone gives themselves time to do as we're entering a new quarter and we're also entering a new month. We also look at how we capture data. And since this year for design thinking, we are also being extremely intentional about how AI can help make our lives easier. I wanted to share how AI tools can equally help enhance the experience of us developing journey maps and developing empathy maps. So with AI tools, for example, with natural language procession, some of the things you can look at there are Google Cloud Natural Language APIs. And why these are helpful is, again, getting customer data is a lot of information. There's a lot of feedback you get if you're doing your research well. And by doing your research well, I mean, you're not just taking quantitative data that says 80% of my customers are happy, but you're taking qualitative data that's saying, why is this 80% happy? What exactly is good about that experience? Is this experience shared by other people? And if they are sad, again, what are the in-depth reasons for these emotions? And so using this tool simply makes it easier for you to identify these pain points in this feedback so that you can sift through it and focus more on translating those pain points into gain points for your users. You can also use text analytics platforms such as Monkey Learn and Lexalytics, where for the insights that you're getting that are unstructured, it's easier for you to get it into thematic areas. So again, usually when you're getting data, there are going to be different categories that emerge. Categories around price, categories around design, categories around functionalities, categories around culture and how it affects users' current environment. And what this tool does is it's just going to make it a lot easier for you to make those categorizations so that you can focus more on dwelling out those insights, and it can make it a lot easier for you to read that data. You can also use BOC analytic tools. And again, that's when you're using different forms of data and your data is coming out in different manners. So when you have text, when you have voice, when you have images, when you have graphics, just making a simpler way for you to understand and also show this information via infographics. And then even with journey mapping, you can visualize, right, with the journey maps. And Adobe equally has tools for that, creating the journey maps, creating those pain points. You can use the Adobe Experience platform, and you can use UX Press here. And so again, these processes you can do manually, which we do a lot in design thinking, where we get our pen, we get our paper, we get our thinking notes. But the whole idea is, again, technology makes things easier. That's the whole idea of a VUCA world, where things are more challenging. So whatever tools help us progress make sense. If you want to link to those tools as well, you can leave something in the comments and we would share after the session, I'm sure. But these things can just make it a lot easier when it comes to looking at that data to make sure you're still serving the needs of your customers and going beyond those needs to respond to the journey that they actually experience in using your solution. So something I would like to sum up the entire conversation with is a quote by Vincent van Gogh. And I know he's from the art world, and sometimes it seems a bit distant from what we're talking about when it comes to design thinking. But I do think this quote is very bold, because a big challenge sometimes when we are trying to be intentional about the products we build and have faith and take time to really make sure those products respond to customers is that it means that we could have done a lot of work and insights and we have to scrap it. And that can be very daunting, challenging, and be very downing. But why I like this quote is because it says that what would life be if we had no courage to attempt anything? And sometimes attempting is simply being able to have the power to iterate, the power to understand that the world changes and the customer's needs changes. I build a great product, but I have to constantly make sure that product is responding to those evolving needs of the customer, and always be able to match that insight and get that data. And so as we work on rediscovering our customers as we move into the next month and the next quarter, I hope this is something that we can have the courage to do, to be intentional about looking into the data, going into the field, going beyond qualitative information, and also going beyond just solving problems towards actually developing meaningful things to the user journeys of our customers towards success. So thank you all for your time today and for joining the session. I hope it's been extremely direct when it comes to understanding that solving problems are good, but solving problems are not enough, because usually problems of today are more complex than problems of yesterday, and how we apply design thinking tools like empathy maps and journey maps to extrapolating our problems and mapping them out, understanding what the insights are from them, and using this to develop better solutions that are clearer, targeted to an easy to understand market, and easy for customers to adopt. And so, yeah, thank you for your time. At this point, I would leave a few minutes for questions and comments in case there are any, and then we would wrap up the session for today. Yes, Estelin, I see you have your hand raised. Do go ahead. Thank you for the applause upside. Yes, hi, Estelin.
Hi, Brian. Great job. Very excellent. I learned a lot about thinking beyond problem solving and, really understanding the market space. Also about the VUCA model, which I wasn't familiar with, and companies like Lego, even your Vita brand and Segway. So my question was, for most businesses, once they get started, it takes some time for them to gain traction in the market. So at which point do you start thinking about, hey, should I start rediscovering the market? Should I start rethinking my solution to target whatever problem I have? Is there like a particular point that you think is important to start looking at your model and asking those questions?
Thank you very much for that question. That's a brilliant question. And Estella is my sister, but she's not a plant. I think it's genuinely coming from her heart.
No, it is.
Yeah, love to get the question. So yeah, that's really good. And again, for someone with a young company, it's the question of we've been operational for and delivering our services for like under a year, and also have not even done marketing yet. So to even be at the point where we are saying that we are thinking of revising our product because we've already understood the customer need can seem crazy for a lot of people. But the whole point of when I think you look at your traction and look at if what you're doing is enough is simply from when you look at the data of your successes, right? So we think we're quite successful for the period we've been in. Again, we've delivered a lot of services. We've had a lot of good value. We've had a lot of repeat customers. We've been hitting our targets for this year so far, month on month. But then we realized that although we are doing this, a lot of customers that can fully fulfill the services with us is because either their budgets couldn't match the service value, or because they had other burdens at the time, or they were in locations that were far from us. And so it's often not the problem of, is it too early? But it should simply be the problem of, are there customers that you want to deliver value to that you are not meeting? And if you are not meeting them, is there an issue with how you deliver value? So I think if you're a business, whether you do a quarterly review or a monthly review, simply looking at the end of the period to mostly understand what customers drop off or couldn't benefit from my product, and asking yourself if that's because there's a flaw with how the product is designed, and you need to rethink how that product is designed so that those customers can get that value. So in short, you can do that at any point just from reviewing your data, and not seeing success as you have to stop, but seeing success as now you have to think of, why are the people not successfully going through the sales funnel, not going through that sales funnel, and can my products be better to make them do that? A long answer, but I hope it answered your question.
Oh, definitely did. Thank you again.
Right, you're most welcome. Thank you, Kofi Jampi, for the comment as well. Glad you found the session enjoyable. We would leave about a minute more for if there are any more questions. Again, for anyone who does want the information and the data, wants more insights, again, this is support Design Thinking Ghana Hub provides, and this is pretty much what we do with our time in the businesses we do. So you can always feel free to reach out after the call, to Matt, to the team. And so even if you don't ask your questions here or reach out here, you can always still reach out after to get that information.
Brian, I have a question in the chat, but I don't know if you can see it. I'm gonna.
Thank you, Paulina. I think you might have to, trying to go, because I'm sharing screen. Dr. Gordon, might you be able to read as I look through? I think I see the response from Paulina, Kofi.
All right. So I'll read it out. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I think I'm realizing now that I sent it to you. So I'm posting it in the general group now. But so it looks like, my observation was that it looks like Fita does a really wonderful job of not only tracking customer sort of customer experience and the challenges that they face, but then also incorporating all of that into design and redesign and so forth. And so then I'm wondering, when do you actually do that? I mean, is that like every other Friday? Is there a small team that's
every day they're looking at customers?
And coming up with new directions in your weekly calls? Is it just you, the design thinking guru, just sort of looking into the sky and saying, I think we need to change that, or we need to do this? Like, how do you actually do this? Because I think a lot of startups struggle with this process of they struggle with this process of learning and redesigning and implementing. So it'd be good to learn a little about that.
Absolutely. Thank you for your question, Dr. Gordon, which I guess was also like a compliment. So thanks for the compliment as well. So I think for us, so it is largely inspired by the fact that, again, currently, I would say since university and since meeting you and the DT team, I have been a design thinker at heart. So with building a company, it's extremely core to making sure that our company is really responding to a need. And what I talk to my team about is we have to make sure we have happy customers, not just satisfied customers, but customers who genuinely enjoy the product. So one thing we do is after every service, we do a feedback form. So we review every single service. Doesn't matter how many we do, even to the point where if our customers don't fill our feedback form because they don't have time, and I think one of my colleagues, Jemima, is on the call, so she can testify to it. We actually call those customers to tell them, hey, we'll put the data down. Just tell us what it was, rate 5 out of 5. And if you have any comments, we'd love to hear it. So we make sure that services aren't going by, that we are not getting data on what went well or what went wrong. And that even if the customer is busy, there is a follow-up because that data matters. And then at the end of every week, we have review meetings on Friday. And again, because we're young, maybe we just have more of the capacity to do so. But in those Friday meetings, we take internal feedback from, again, since we're delivering a product, how when we delivered the product, it was responded to, whether it was a service or a new customer we spoke to. People sign up from our platform by deciding to join our community, which is like an application they send in, and after they pay if they want to be members, or they just do a one-off service. So we equally analyze that data of, okay, why did a group of customers decide to become members? Why did a group of customers just use a one-off service? And which group found more value? And which group do we serve more? So we also look at those junctions of information. So these meetings happen in sub-teams, and then like at the end of, I think, the quarter or monthly, it depends, we then do a full team meeting to look at the data across departments. So there's just generally a lot of intentionality and collecting feedback after every single service, a lot of intentionality, and having team meetings to review the data from the customers end and from the operations end, and then getting back to the customer. So I think even we revised our memberships last month. We called about half of our members when we were doing so to ask them if they found value in these new memberships. Because our simple idea is if we can get our core of customers who have given us a shot, it's going to be a lot easier to get the mass market. So there's just a lot of intentionality processes, feedback collection requirements, and update meetings to see what is the success rate of our product, not just in terms of the money we make, but in terms of if what the customer is using their product for is satisfying the need we believed was their actual problem. Right. I hope that answer is clear enough.
Yeah, no, it's amazing and inspiring. And I think that I mean, you can imagine what would happen if startups, had a process like this of collecting data and analyzing the data and putting it into processes. Absolutely. So what advice do you have for startups? Are you just going to say follow our lead? What advice do you have for them in terms of the challenges you had as well, and how you think they can how you think they can start and how you think they can sustain?
Thanks for that. So I think the first thing is the customer cares about your product, but most times when they're satisfied or something, don't give you feedback or they get busy. So you have to understand that you getting the customer's feedback and understanding their experience is not their responsibility to give it to you. It's your responsibility to collect that information and make it as easy as possible to collect it. So I think the first thing you have to do is review the tools you're using for service delivery. First, if you're not collecting data for how well your services are being received, you should. If the tools you're using to collect those are not efficient enough, you have to revise those and have better tools. So that's the first thing we do, where we send a feedback form after every service. If it's not completed, we call the next day. And also, every other week, we usually plan a call to call that customer to make sure everything is fine. So first thing, just have your tools, make sure they work. If they don't work, have ones that work, and have a follow-up system. I think if you start doing that, you'll collect the data. Also know that it's not a perfect process to execute, but once you've started off from, at least like I showed, we had a journey map, we had a value fulfillment blueprint and everything. It's always easy for you to look back at it as you revise your product. So all our old product versions are still available. I don't think the issue with some of them is that they aren't good. I just think they are for a future market. So if you don't yet have like an empathy map, you don't yet have a customer journey, you don't yet have your value fulfillment blueprint, what departments do start developing that. Otherwise, when you reach bottlenecks, you're not actually going to know how those bottlenecks are solved. So we do, as I showed, have those tools for us and things we do for our services. Like this is an extensive BFB. It has a functional requirements, non-functional, for even what happens when a customer breaks down, even what happens after the customer's car is fixed and they're long gone. So have these tools, have the systems, everything developed for your business and its operations, and make sure that every time you review the data, you don't end there, you revise it on the tool. And if you're ever testing a new product from that, you test with a group of customers to validate that, because you don't also want to change up everything and find out that it's not actually what the customers want. So yeah, tools, data collection, and intentionality about going back to that, to those. You're welcome. We
No,
are
you were
working very
hoping
hard
something.
towards
Sorry.
it. If anyone wants to know, yeah, I was saying, and we are very confident. We are getting a lot of good responses. And like I said, we're looking to actually start talking to new users. We're working with a focus group, but we're looking to finally like expand it a lot further, moving from next month. And so ideally, maybe by the closer to the end of the year, I'm sure in one of the sessions, we'll love to give an update on how this data has actually affected our numbers, our customer success rate, our service delivery, the value we've been generating, our product design, and so on. So we're tracking that data. So if the DT team also wants to like plug just giving that feedback into one of the sessions, we would love to share what those insights were for us in our journey.
That's great. There are a lot of our colleagues on the line who would love to hear from them as well. Kofi Jenfi, Paulina, Teresa, Kosia. Don't know if Matt's still in class. Emilia. We've all played with journey maps, done sessions. Any additional insights to share?
So I think so far it would look like a majority of the comments have been dropped in the chat. If there are more questions, happy with the response to the presentation delivery, happy for those who found insights in the information as well. And again, for any further support or insight, the DT team and myself are always very open to share more information. I'm sure there'll be more sessions that build up on the content that was shared today.
Okay, all right. So it's probably can't speak. So thank you very much, Brian. That was insightful. I mean, all these examples about from Lego to Segway to Theta. I think it's all very interesting. It's extremely important to go beyond functionality to how customers experience the product. It's not enough to build something and say, oh yeah, people will love it. So thank you so much for sharing that and sharing all of those examples. And we're very excited for Theta and what is going to achieve and how it's going to change the way we relate to our vehicles and so forth. Very excited about that. So all the best on that. And to everybody else, see you next week. Not next week. See you next month for another exciting session of the Design Thinking Ghana meetup, monthly meetup. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.